Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest installment in my series about Duelyst, produced in partnership with Counterplay Games. Today I want to talk about one of Duelyst's alternate game modes called the Gauntlet. The Gauntlet is a mode in which you build a new deck as you go by selecting from a limited assortment of cards presented to you, and then compete against other players who've done the same. It's similar to drafting in Magic the Gathering or the Arena in Hearthstone. The Gauntlet gives anyone a chance to compete on even footing against anyone else, no matter what's the size of either player's collection. It also lets players explore very different strategies than you'll run into in the usual constructed metagame. You can find the Gauntlet through the Play menu, here on the right. The Gauntlet is only available certain days of the week, which currently are Wednesdays, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The Gauntlet costs 150 gold to enter, and you play until you lose 3 times or achieve 12 wins. After you're done, you receive prizes based on your result. If you win at least 7 times, you'll earn a Gauntlet ticket good for an additional entry. Go ahead and choose to start right here. First thing you do when you start is select your faction. I'm personally a fan of Magmar, so we'll pick that. Now you see, you will receive a selection of 3 cards, and you must choose between them. You can see the contents of your deck on the right-hand side of the screen, as well as a map of the costs and card type breakdown of your deck on the bottom. As you go, you'll want to select a mix of various costs of cards as well as types of cards to ensure that you have a deck that is competitive both in the early game and when the game goes late. I usually like to have, say, 6 cards that cost 2 mana, usually 3 to 5 cards that cost 3 mana, and then maybe 4 cards that cost 4 mana and a couple cards at each cost above that. The cards that are powerful in the Gauntlet are in many cases very similar to cards that are powerful in constructed play, but the average power level of decks in the Gauntlet is typically much lower. Players have to select from a smaller pool of cards and have less access to cards of high rarities, so they need to do more with less, which can lead to some pretty interesting gameplay. Oftentimes you're selecting not only between cards of the appropriate costs to have a mana curve within your deck, but also cards that may have synergy with one another. We see I just took a card here that cares about spells and Arcanist minions, so I may be on the lookout for more Arcanist minions and additional spells for my deck. Often simply minions that have very good stat lines and abilities that make them effective in combat are more powerful in Gauntlet than they are in normal constructed play. Grow, for instance, is very, very powerful in the Gauntlet because there are fewer effects that can dispel the minions, as well as a lower power level on minions in general, which can make the minions with Grow harder for your opponent to kill immediately and thus have a ability to more easily get big and kind of get out of hand. Similarly, larger minions with abilities like flying can be much more effective in the Gauntlet because the lower power level of the cards in general, as well as the less amount of removal in the format, can also make them much more difficult to deal with. Also, cards like Dire-Tide Frenzy that may be difficult to use effectively in Constructed can be much more effective in the Gauntlet because every deck tends to be much more similar in terms of playing a lot of minions to the board, while as in Constructed you may face a lot of decks that have a lot higher spell density, a lot of removal effects. In the Gauntlet, you're almost guaranteed to have a buildup of minions in play and be able to get value out of an effect like Frenzy. Now here, this is an interesting selection because I believe the strongest card here is the Veteran Silithar. It's a very, very powerful minion by itself, We already have quite a few minions that cost 4 mana, only a couple that cost 3, so I think we're just going to take the Earthwalker instead. Here's another card, Greater Fortitude. Not necessarily particularly powerful in a lot of constructed decks because it's easier for many decks to deal with individual large creatures, but if you're able to get a very strong minion with a buff like Greater Fortitude on it in Gauntlet, it's much more likely to dominate the board. Similarly, a card like First Sword of Akrane might not really see much constructed play in high-level competitive decks. However, in the Gauntlet, it is a very powerful card that can really swing games to your advantage. This is an interesting pick. Again, we have several 5-cost cards with the Colossus. We already have 1 copy each of Dire-Tide Frenzy and Greater Fortitude. We, however, have no copies of any minions with Provoke. We can always check to see, the things that the cards in our deck do by mousing over them here on this list, and look at our mana curve down here, as we mentioned before. This is a decision that is a lot to do with personal taste and experience and what kind of deck you want to build. I'm going to go ahead and take the Fireblazer right here. Generally speaking, you usually want to prioritize minions over spells. If you have too many spells in your hand, in the Gauntlet in particular, you will often not have the ability to develop much to your board, and you can fall behind very significantly. We'll take the Sword of Mechazor here. It's a very powerful card. As you mentioned earlier, Frenzy can be quite strong. And now we have quite a few expensive cards, and may be looking for something other than another First Sword of Akrane, but I still think it's the best sword in this pack. Certainly the best sword. Best card as well. Repulsor Beast is a card that is not necessarily super powerful in most high-level constructed play, because oftentimes removal effects will be more plentiful and can do much the same thing. However, in Gauntlet, again, the very heavily minion-based game can make Repulsor Beast very effective at giving you a big advantage. White Widow can be very difficult for a lot of players to deal with because, again, not nearly as much removal in the format, so even a card that can be relatively easily killed in combat, if you're able to hide it in a corner, it can be difficult for your opponent to deal with. Similarly, ranged minions, like this Cannon Mechazor, can be very effective in the Gauntlet, even if they don't necessarily have particularly strong stats. A card like this can be very effective at swinging games in the format. Adamantite Claws is an extremely powerful card in the Gauntlet. Any card that provides you with the ability to deal with larger minions with your general can be extremely effective, and this card is quite strong. Go ahead and take this Earthwalker, and as we see, we are getting down to the last cards in our deck. We have 27 out of the 30 cards. We'll take this. And we already have several large minions in our deck. A Dispel effect can generally come in handy against opposing buffs or things like ranged minions or provokes. And now we select our final card. Usually removal effects like Eggmorph are a high priority in the Gauntlet, so this is an excellent selection here as well. And now we can choose to play our deck. We will get to play again until we either lose 3 times or win 12 times. We'll go ahead and jump into one game right here.
Magmar versus Vanar.
And here we have our gameplay. We can just go ahead and choose to play it very similarly to normal constructed. The exact rules are clearly the same, simply the sorts of cards that you can expect your opponent to play often differ somewhat. as you continue to win and lose in your Gauntlet run, you tend to run into other players with similar records, so you'll generally be competing against decks that are similar in power level to your own. Gauntlet can lead to lots of unexpected combinations that you wouldn't really tend to see in the constructed play. When was the last time you saw a Grimrock fly on over to kill a Colossus? Sometimes you'll still run into opponents with powerful legendary cards in the Gauntlet, but sometimes you can win anyway. If you can't or don't want to finish your Gauntlet run on one of the days that the Gauntlet is open, you can simply save your deck for the next time the Gauntlet is available. If you choose to end your run early before you receive 3 losses, you can choose to resign, and you'll receive your prizes as if you had finished your run. Here we can claim our rewards with 9 wins. And we see we've received a Gauntlet ticket, a card, another card, a Spirit Orb, some gold, as well as Spirit. So you can receive excellent prizes for performing well in the Gauntlet, and if you do well enough, you can receive free entry in addition to that. So I hope you enjoyed that look at the Gauntlet. I think it's a really cool way to play Duelyst that lets you play with cards you might not even have, and get a chance to explore and experiment with different strategies you might not normally play. So anyway, that is it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.